This episode is brought to you by Anytime Fitness. We may talk a whole lot about sports, but when it comes to keeping fit ourselves, there's definitely room for improvement. I hit this point early July. I was just like, I am not in good enough shape. I started trying to walk at least 15,000 steps a day or hiking or just anything to keep my legs moving. Now it's the end of 2023. I feel great. I had a physical 3 weeks ago, and the guy was like, "You're doing great. You're doing better than you were 3 years ago." I felt great. Whatever your goals are, progress is possible thanks to Anytime Fitness. Get a personalized plan and support from an expert coach anytime, anywhere. Visit anytimefitness.com to try Anytime Fitness for free. Start to train for your life. Terms, conditions, and restrictions apply. See website for details. This episode is brought to you by Atlassian. Atlassian software like Jira, Confluence, and Trello help power global collaboration for all teams so they can accomplish everything that's impossible alone. Because individually we're great, but together we're so much better. Learn how to unleash the potential of your team at Atlassian.com. Atlassian.com. Atlassian. Tap the banner or visit this episode's page to learn more.
Welcome back to Through the Ringer. I am your host, Tate Frazier, and we got a good show for you today. We're talking about hockey again. We got our girl, Katie Bakes, coming on. Katie Baker, of course, of the Ringer. She's going to break down what's going on in the Final Four of the NHL playoffs. And also, we're going to have my old friend, Tyler Hansbrough of North Carolina fame and of Indiana Pacer fame come on the show, talk about the coaching carousel and just some, big picture basketball topics in general. Again, this is Through the Ringer. Let's get to Katie Bakes right now. Welcome back into Through the Ringer. I am your host, Tate Frazier, and we have a recurring guest here on Through the Ringer. She is the Ringer's very own Katie Baker, a.k.a. Katie Bakes, and we're talking NHL playoffs. Katie, thanks so much for coming back on the show.
Hello. How is Mr. Carolina feeling right now?
I'm a little excited. Obviously we're going to talk about the NHL here, but we got the NBA lottery, odds last night. I felt something, Katie Bakes. That's all you can ask for in the world of NBA basketball when you're one of these local small teams. So just to feel something again is great. We didn't get Wemby, but, we're not completely out of the race. We might get Scoot Henderson, might get Brandon Miller. So, as a Carolina guy and as a Carolina Hurricane, I'm pretty excited about how things are going right now. So who would have thought? And Bryce Young, right? It's a good time to be someone who is a fan of anything Carolina, which we'll take that. Let's talk about the Stanley Cup playoffs because we started with 16 teams. We are down to 4 teams. I like to call them the Frozen Four. I know that's a college term, but I still like it. The record-setting Boston Bruins, the number 1 overall seed, the team that everybody loved, they got ousted in the first round by the Florida Panthers. The defending champs, the Colorado Avalanche, the team that some thought could go back and repeat. They were knocked out and upset by the Seattle Kraken. And now we have the Carolina Hurricanes and the Florida Panthers in the East, the Dallas Stars taking on the Golden Knights in the West. And Katie, before we get into those specific matchups, can I just get your reaction to first Boston losing, and what are the bettors going to do now that they don't have their odds-on favorite, and what's it going to look like moving forward?
Well, it's funny. I'm sure a lot of the people that were betting on Boston, moved to the Toronto Maple Leafs in the second round, and now they're out too. And so, right. I think, some of that's also kind of moving to teams like Carolina, Dallas, that sort of came into the playoffs without as much of a buzz, but are, now part of this little Sunbelt Cup that we have going on.
Yeah, who would have thought this is where we end up? And as we look at the Eastern Conference, right, we got the Carolina Hurricanes, and FanDuel has the odds for us, so they're minus 145. We got the Florida Panthers at plus 120. I'll ask you a simple question. Who do you like in this series? Obviously, Vegas and the odds makers seem to like the Carolina Hurricanes, but what do you forecast in this one?
Well, I think for starters, both of these are going to be close. While it's tough to say this, I kind of am leaning toward Florida in this one. I just think Carolina really, part of the reason they came into the playoffs without much buzz is because they had such drastic injuries. Like 2 of their 3 top leading scorers from last year got another big injury in the playoffs. They've been playing really well as a team. They've got, I think, 14 players that have scored goals in 11 games. And That said, it's tough to keep that up over the course of what could be two more really long, series. So the Florida Panthers, I just think, are an interesting team. They were a, President's Cup winner last year. They've got some young player or some, kind of not so young anymore, young to me players like Alexander Barkov that I think can still find another level going forward. And so, I can kind of see them really taking this as their opportunity to step up, after having a year where they beat the Bruins, for example, and, take that opportunity and run with it.
Yeah, and that first game is tonight, Thursday night on TNT. That'll be happening at 8 Eastern. So get ready for that one. That's going to be a fun series. We can flip to the Western Conference now because we look at these odds. You got the Vegas Golden Knights there at -135. You got the Dallas Stars that are +110. Katie, I look at this series, for whatever reason, I feel like Vegas, they're kind of my favorite, from the outside bird's eye view that I have as I'm watching the NHL playoffs. But in this series, can you buy into the Stars a little bit, or do you believe in the Knights?
So going into the playoffs, like in the first round when we last spoke, I was pretty high on the Stars, and I still am for the same reasons. They are another team that has a ton of experience. And that said, at the start of the season, I did a big Jack Eichel profile. He came from the Buffalo Sabres, where he had, they had very high hopes for him. He had neck injuries, kind of did not get along with the team at the end. So he's got like a big chip on his shoulder, and he's really been coming alive in the playoffs. And so I kind of think we can continue to see that. They're a fun team to watch, really, both at home and on the road. And I think like with Vegas, a big thing is their defensive depth. They just shut down Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. Dallas has the edge in goaltending, I would say. That said, their goalie has kind of shown that he can be rattled. He hasn't been like totally stalwart this postseason. So,
right.
I think this could be a fun one. And it could go either way, but I'm going with the Knights too on this.
Yeah, and I will say, just after that Kraken series, going 7 games, that was a hard-fought series, 2 really tough teams, so maybe the Stars are kind of, licking their wounds a little bit after that one. All right, so now we got the Stanley Cup Finals odds. This is just the outright betting as you look ahead at the futures. So now we got my Carolina Hurricanes. They are the favorites, which I'm a little bit, I don't even know if I like that, Katie, but they're at +200. You got the Vegas Golden Knights at +240, the Dallas Stars at +300, and the Florida Panthers at +350, but kind of shows there's no real, standout favorite at this point, obviously, once we lost the Boston Bruins. But who do you like in that group to go ahead and, as we forecast the future, win the Stanley Cup?
Well, this is going to be at odds with some of my Conn Smythe thoughts, but I mean, I think it'd be fun to see a Florida-Vegas final. And so I'm going to say, if that were the case, and I think this is a tough one, actually. I could see this being Florida's year. I'm gonna go with that one. I don't know, just kind of feels right. I mean, I think especially if you're looking for, I guess there's only 4 teams left, so none of them seem to have really significant odds. But it's intriguing to me. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, they have the team with +350. They have the most value probably left, obviously, in front of us. And, the Tampa Bay Lightning, it's always funny when you see Florida teams win, the Stanley Cup. So I like that. I like the zag there with the Florida Panthers. And then you mentioned the Conn Smythe Trophy. We got the odds here in front of us. We got Sebastian Aho at +650. He's the favorite from the Hurricanes. The guy that I like, though, Katie Baker, and I'll throw him at you, Sergei Bobrovsky. That is my guy. He is always a character. He's always in the mix. He's at +1,000. But as you look at, the Conn Smythe Trophy and the odds there, is there anyone that stands out to you that you think will be the one who holds that trophy in the end?
I like the Bobrovsky idea just because he really has shown in the past that he can kind of be that, that goalie that steals games. And, he's not very far removed from that. The one that I'm intrigued by, which is not on the list, so sorry if I'm going off the board here, but the defenseman Brent Burns on Carolina. And like I said, this goes against my pick of Florida. But if you're looking for value, the numbers I've seen for him are like 2,000, 1,700, like that area. And I just think if Carolina, were to advance, it would be in large part because of him, shutting down Florida's offense, and he plays a ton of minutes. He's kind of one of those guys that's been in the league for a while. He was on the San Jose Sharks for a long time. Everyone loves him. These are human voters that, sometimes are just voting for, the guy that they get the vibes from. So I could see Brent Burns being just a fun little value play, if that's the terminology.
I think it is, and I like that you go off the board there. Matthew Tkachuk is another guy that, the Panthers traded for last offseason. I wanted to focus on him. He's at plus 800. And, how did this trade go down last offseason? I feel like a lot of people maybe need to get their memory refreshed on how he ended up in Florida.
Yeah, so they, I believe they traded Jonathan Huberdeau and kind of a package. And Tkachuk's a really fun one because he just has like that great personality. Like you could see him after Florida advanced and they interviewed him, and he understands that they're going to be sort of an overlooked team, and I think he finds that exciting. And he's a Tkachuk, which in the NHL is a legendary name, and so I feel like he's someone else that, like, if Florida does advance, it would likely be in large part, I would think, because of his contributions. So he's a fun one to like root for personally as well. Just rabble rouser and a confident guy.
Yeah, absolutely. He's one of those guys that can steal the headlines, probably has some high Q scores, right? And, if you believe in the Florida Panthers like Katie Baker, maybe you take him there, the Conn Smythe odds at plus 800. One last story I want to hit in the NHL world before I let you go. Obviously, we got the playoffs ahead. Like I said, you can watch the Hurricanes tonight. That's going to be a fun game one there. But in more somber news in the world of the NHL, especially if you're someone who is a fan of the Arizona Coyotes, they struck down the proposition, right, to build a new arena there in Arizona. There's always been some kind of back and forth, some turmoil, but it looks like Gary Bettman and the NHL will be looking probably for a new home for this franchise. So I wanted to throw that out to you. I don't have any odds. I haven't tried to put this up. I'm sure FanDuel will eventually do this, but if you had to look ahead and say what fits, right, for a franchise in the NHL, what city makes the most sense? There's been Salt Lake City, right, that's been thrown out. Quebec City has been thrown out. Even Kansas City. Some people saying maybe Pat Mahomes wants to bring an NHL team to Kansas City. But Katie, for you, where do you see the Coyotes going, and what does that look like in the future?
Well, first of all, it's just kind of wild to sit here and think about how long this Arizona Coyotes arena issue has gone on. Like, I found an old article I wrote a decade ago in 2013 where I make reference to the fact that it had already been going on for a long time. So, this recent roadblock, though, really seems like it's kind of a one that might actually like cause a move. And, you mentioned Salt Lake City. I've seen that one that sort of really started to pop up today as a potential suitor. They already have some sort of a facility and, kind of in the same realm in the West, in terms of not having to do any rejiggering. It's interesting. Kansas City does always kind of come up as a contender in these conversations over the years. Quebec City does too. Unfortunately, for the good people of that area, I don't know that the NHL is eager to put a team there. And I don't say that like I'm not the one making the decision, but I would say I think the Salt Lake City thing is starting to have a little bit of legs, but again, it's kind of early and chaotic. As we're, the vote just kind of got struck down yesterday, and like a very, off cycle election turnout. I mean, I think they sort of mishandled the way that they thought this referendum might go.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, there's already been some reports about Ryan Smith, who is the owner of the Jazz, meeting with Gary Bettman, obviously. And like you said, they have an arena there in Salt Lake City. So if you're trying to put two and two together, maybe that equals a situation where the NHL ends up in Salt Lake City. But I feel bad for Haller the Coyote. Like you said, this has been a saga, to say the least, in Arizona. You got the Tempe mayor coming out and talking about how appreciative he is of the experience and the time that the NHL had in Arizona us, so it feels like a capper of sorts. But we'll stay on top of this story as it develops, and we'll see what happens there with the NHL. She is the great Katie Baker. Katie, thanks so much for coming on the show, talking NHL. Where can we find the rest of your work on The Ringer? Obviously, probably, most likely, theringer.com, right?
Yep, ringer.com for all your succession and hockey and et cetera needs.
I love it. Thanks so much for coming on the show, Katie. We'll have you back.
Thanks for having me. Take care.
All right, joining us now is one of my favorite players in college basketball history and the most decorated North Carolina Tar Heel ever. He is about to be inducted into the College Basketball Hall of Fame. He's a 2009 national champion. We can get into all the accolades later, but of course his name is Tyler Hansbrough. Tyler, thanks so much for coming on the show, man.
Hey, Tate, glad to be here, man. Thank you, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, I got to ask because I saw the headline. It was Tyler Hansbrough is going to be in this Hall of Fame class, and obviously you get all the flashbacks. That was a very pivotal time in my life. But just for you, when you get that phone call and you kind of get told that you're going to be in the Hall of Fame, obviously you're still a young guy. How did that feel to get this honor so early in your life?
Yeah, well, it was kind of funny because the first thing that popped in my mind was, man, I'm kind of getting old. But no, I was extremely excited. It's as somebody who grew up in a small town, Poplar Bluff, Missouri, and watching college basketball my whole life. I remember when my dad would take me and my brothers to watch the Mizzou and Illinois rivalry in St. Louis, which is about a 3-hour drive from Poplar Bluff. And to me, that was so big. And then when Carolina started recruiting me, it was almost too big of a, Carolina was one of those programs that you just kind of dream about playing at. And when they started recruiting me and what I accomplished, and then I get the phone call to get into the Hall of Fame, it was it was amazing. But also, as I said, somebody who grew up in a small town in Poplar Bluff, Missouri, this is a reflection of a lot of coaches, a lot of teammates, and a lot of people in the community who have helped me throughout the years. So I know my name will be attached to the Hall of Fame, but also it represents a lot of other people in my life that have helped me.
Yeah, and in college, we obviously have these names, like I mentioned before, and you always see kind of these rumors that happen in the offseason with the NBA, right? I remember 2004, there was a big kind of hoopla about, the Lakers were looking to hire potentially Mike Krzyzewski. And, I remember Roy one time had an interview with an NBA franchise, right? And then Jay Wright, he's kind of meddled in that territory. Rick Pitino goes to the Celtics, right, and then comes back to college basketball. We've seen coaches in college make that jump to the NBA, but now it feels like almost two different sports when you talk about the coaches that are in college and the coaches that are in the NBA. How different, and is it even likely now that we'll see guys make that jump? It used to be something that was possible, but it feels now like it's a totally different game.
It's totally different. And if I look across the college basketball landscape and look at the coaches, the only coach who I think would probably leave for them, maybe Calipari, when I look at it, because he it just seems like he might be more of an NBA, type of coach. But the game is so different at the NBA level. And also, I would speculate maybe that might be just a little bit of a recruiting tactic. If you get buzz around a college coach, not taking the Lakers job and staying at, let's just say, one of these big time programs, there's something to be said about that. From the outside, it looks like, man, this guy is loyal. We know he's not going anywhere. They just offered him a huge deal. But in reality, the NBA game is so different. You look at the turnover in these coaches, just this offseason. They fired Doc Rivers. They fired Nick Nurse. Monty Williams is out now. Budenholzer at Milwaukee's out. These coaches in the NBA, they don't stay at programs long. And that's the other thing I'm starting to realize in college. They're starting to have some turnover, kind of like the NBA. But it takes a while to turn over a college basketball program. If you go if you take a program that's not doing well and you walk in there with a good coach, I don't care who it is, Pitino Pitino's going to have success. Not everyone's Rick Pitino, but you take a coach, and it's going to take them a while to turn over a program. At the NBA, you're expected, if you're the next 76ers coach, you're expected to go and win maybe a title next year. So it's just a totally different aspect, and it's more business at the NBA level.
Yeah, and you mentioned the 76ers job, and I have to mention a guy who is now the favorite to get that job, and he's a guy that you played against in college. We'll talk about his senior night a little bit because that's one of my favorite memories. But J.J. Redick is the favorite right now to be the 76ers head coach. I'm not sure he's going to take that job. He's got a really popular podcast, got a nice spot at ESPN right now. But how much does that kind of exemplify what we're talking about, that we're in a world where they're just going to bring in someone like J.J. Redick because he probably handles the personalities of the players better than, say, a coach that's been coaching for 20, 30 years, something like that?
Well, yeah, that is a good aspect. And also there's a little bit of me who thinks maybe that some of these GMs, if they get a young guy, they don't have to pay him a lot, and they can have more pull or more say. If you bring in pull or say what the GM wants the coach to do. So I think the GM, it gives them more power if they have an inexperienced coach or a young guy, because they feel like they can influence them. If you bring in a coach like Mike D'Antoni and you have a GM, do you think he's going to listen to the GM? No. He's had experience. He knows how to win, what to win. There's not going to be a lot of influence I think the GM's going to have on a veteran coach who's had a lot of success. So I think there's an aspect to having a young coach that a lot of people don't think about. But I listen to JJ. I think JJ has a lot of good thoughts and takes, and it would be interesting to me to see how that would translate and how receptive those players would be, because you've got to have a lot of respect to kind of get the attention or really push an MVP. And also James Harden, who's a vet. I mean, you're going to have to, they're going to have a lot of respect for you.
Which gets me to the 2009 draft, which was, a crazy draft. The Timberwolves had 4 first-round picks. They drafted 3 point guards. Then they drafted Wayne Ellington, another one of your teammates. You get drafted 13th right after the Charlotte Bobcats had the 12th pick, and they took Gerald Henderson right before you. What do you remember from the 2009 draft, and how fun was it to have your teammates all kind of be there for that moment?
Yeah, it was really cool. I remember Frazier was there, a couple managers, and I had everyone. I had my parents, my older brother. It was a special moment for me to get picked, and also it was really cool because Larry Bird picked me, small town, basketball legend. And so from that aspect, I remember hugging my family. Coach Williams was there, hugging him, and man, I had put so much work into that draft process, and I saw my name from anywhere from late first round to early lottery. And I felt like we had, the draft workouts, I'd put myself in good position to get drafted right around the mid first round, maybe in the teens. And then I had an unbelievable workout actually for New Jersey. New Jersey had me in for 2 workouts, and I thought there's a chance I might go there. They took Terrence Williams. And I actually worked out for them a couple of days before the draft, which is, kind of rare, but I was excited being at Indiana. I'm a Midwest guy from Missouri, so kind of close, but not really. So it was really cool, and I was happy to be going to Indiana.
Yeah. Do you have a Larry Bird story? Because I know, like you said, was Bird the one that called you and told you were getting picked?
No, I don't think Bird called me. I saw him the next day when I flew to Indiana. I do. One of my favorite Bird stories is when he was a GM for the Pacers, he never missed a home practice. He was at every home practice when I was on the team. And one day he came into the locker room. He said, the reason I come to these practices, I want you guys to know that I'm working and I'm here every single day and I see what you guys are doing. I don't want you to ever think that I'm not working. And that's one of my favorite stories because I never saw that from any other GM. And I really respected that because I could relate.
Tyler, thanks so much for coming on the show, man. Thanks for sharing some of your stories. Again, the podcast is Sleep Hawk Worldwide. Anything else you want to plug before we let you get out of here?
That's it. I appreciate it, Tate. Glad to come on here with you.
Yeah, man, we'll have you back. Again, he is Tyler Hansbrough, getting in the Hall of Fame August 30th in Chicago, alongside some legends there. And we will have him back here on One Shining Podcast. Thanks again, Tyler.
Thank you. I'll see you.
right, there you have it. Katie Baker, Tyler Hansbrough. I'm having a lot of fun on the show. I get to talk to Carolina alums, and I get to talk to some of my favorite people from the Ringer. You can't really beat that. Again, this is Through the Ringer, and we will see you back on Tuesday next week.